In this particular video, we're going to be reviewing the 7th grade geometry standard, 7.G4, which covers understanding the area and circumference of a circle. Today's lesson is going to be circumference review. Our I can statements for today: I can identify the radius and diameter. I can find the circumference of a circle given the radius or the diameter. So before we load or get into our circumference review, I am going to take a brief review on rounding to the nearest 10th place, since whenever we're dealing with circumference, many times the questions either on SchoolNet or EOGs or practice problems are going to require students to start rounding to the nearest 10th place value. If I said 100th, I meant 10th. So the first part that we're going to review is rounding to the nearest 10th. Before we went out, we found, as a class, we decided on multiple sayings. One of the sayings that we decided on to use was 5 or more, raise the score, 4 or less, let it rest. And that's going to apply to the number in the hundredths place since we are rounding to the nearest 10. So let's very quickly review our place values. So the first place value that I want to review is the one right after the decimal place. This is your tenth. This is your hundredth. And then this is going to be your thousands, and we're not going to deal with the thousands as much unless it affects our hundredths place, and we'll get into that a little bit later. So first, we're rounding to the nearest tenth, and we're going to be looking at the number in the hundredths place that's going to help us round today. So again, the number right at the decimal point is your tenth place value. So as we look at number 1, we're going to be rounding to the nearest tenth. The 1 is located in the tenths place, but we're going to be using the 8 in the hundredths place to help us round. So 8 is 5 or more, so we are going to raise the score, which means that the 8 is going to raise the 1 up to a 2. So my rounded number is 37.2. In this case, the 2 is in the tenths place. 4 is 4 or less, so we're going to let it rest. We're going to let the 2 rest. So my number is 6.2. Okay, as we dive into number 3, we have 138. The 2 is in the tenths place. 5 is at 100, so we're rounding to this place value, and my 5 is 5 or more, so we are going to raise the score. So the 5 is going to raise the 2 to a 3. So 138.3 will be my rounded answer, with 3 being in the tenths place. The next one, we have 300 with 9 in the tenths place, and a 6 in 100. So 6 is 5 or more, so we are going to raise the score. The 9 does become a 10 though, which also means I need something to go into the ones place, because the 9 is now going to become a 10. So it would be 301. You're going to put a rounded answer, a rounded place value in the ones place because this became a 10. Okay, the very last 2 that we're going to go over is 2 point with 9 being in the tenths place, 3 in the 100ths. The 3 is 4 or less, so we are going to let it rest, which means the 9 is going to rest in this case. So 2.9 is my answer. 25, we have 0 in the tenths, 3 in the 100ths. 3 is 4 or less, so we are going to let it rest, which means we're going to let the 0 rest. My rounded answer would be 25.0, or you could also just write that as 25. So I hope the very quick and brief rounding to the nearest place value is going to help you round with your circumference problems today. So first, let's go over some basic concepts of a circle real quick, and before we dive into actually solving the problem. So the first example that I want to show you is finding the circumference of a circle. Let's recall that the radius goes halfway of the circle. Don't judge what my circles look like. I do not have a compass at home. Radius is going to go halfway. Diameter is going to go all the way across the circle, and the circumference is what we're looking at today, and that's the area, or not necessarily the area, the length around the circle. That's going to be your circumference. So before we left and got out of school as a class, we kind of talked about different dance moves to remind us of radius, diameter, and circumference. So one dance move to remind us of the radius, students did the sprinkler, where they put a hand on their head and reached one arm out, and they did the old school move, the sprinkler. To remember the diameter, we went to the new age, where students took their hand below their chin and did the period move. And then we also did circumference, where we took it to SpongeBob and we brought it around town to remind us that the circumference was the length around the circle. So now let's go into our 2 different formulas. So we have C equals pi 2r, when the radius is given, we need to multiply by 2 because it only goes halfway. If the diameter is given, we're just going to use pi times diameter. And the reason being is because radius is half of that circle. So let's go over one example of a circle real quick so we can understand these two different formulas. So if I'm given a circle, and let's say that the radius is given and the radius is 6. I can use this formula and plug in 6. So it would be pi times 2 times 6. Or I can also know from the radius being given of 6 that the diameter would be 12 because the diameter is going to go fully across the circle. We know the radius is halfway, so 6 plus 6 is 12. So the diameter would be 12 where the radius would be 6. So let's apply these concepts in a couple examples. Okay. With the first example, we're going to identify which part of the circle is actually given to us. So this one is 14, and the picture showcases that 14 is going all the way across that circle. So the diameter is given in this case, which means all I need to do is choose the formula that has diameter. Now in 7th grade, we're going to be using 3.14 for pi. Students learned that pi is a number that goes on and on and on and on forever and ever. We're going to use its rounded form as 3.14. So circumference equals pi times diameter, and we're going to be using again 3.14 for the diameter today, and we're going to be plugging in the number 14. So if you take out your phone, a calculator, you can even use the Google's version of the calculator. You do not have to have the fancy calculator that I have, the TI-84 at all. The regular calculator will do the exact same thing. So the first part that we're going to do is 3.14 times 14. And that number comes out to be 43.96. And please remember that you need to round to the nearest 10th place. So again, 43.96. So circumference equals 43.96. Our 9 is in our 10th place, and the 6 is going to help us out in rounding. So 6 was 5 or more, raise the score, which means that that number rounds to a 10 instead of a 9, which also means that I need to round the 3 as well. So circumference equals 44 or 44.0. Okay, for number 2, let's identify which part of the circle is actually given to us. So in this particular part of the circle, we have the radius because we see that it's only going halfway. So the radius is given in this case. We're going to use the circumference formula, but let's try using the one with the radius 2r, or 2 times the radius. So with that being said, it's going to look like C equals 3.14. I'm going to use a dot for time so we don't get that confused with an x, times 2 times the radius. So circumference equals 3.14 times 2, and the radius in this particular problem was listed and given to us as 7. So as I plug it into the calculator, 3.14 times 2 times 7 is 43.96. So you can see that we did happen to get the same answer for both of these problems because this one is the radius, which goes halfway, and if I doubled the radius, it would be the diameter, which would be 14. So I wanted to show that as a quick example where we can use the radius and the diameter both to solve the same problem. So again, our circumference was 43.96, which would then round to 44. Okay, let's take a look at a couple more examples. So for number 3, we have the circle, and the radius is given again because we understand that here is the center, and it's only giving us half. So this is the radius that is given to us. Okay, which means that I'm going to use the formula that is pi times 2 times the radius. So C equals pi times 2 times the radius. And then in 7th grade, we're going to be using 3.14 for pi. So 3.14 times 2, and the radius in this case is 12. So then as you take out your calculator, 3.14 times 2 times 12. Our answer becomes 75.36. Okay, rounding to the nearest place value now. We're going to be rounding to the nearest tenth, The 6 is 5 or more, so we are going to raise the score, which makes my rounded answer to be 75.4. Okay, our last example that we're going to go through, this particular circle is letting us know that 20 goes all the way across the circle. So this one happens to be our diameter. Okay, which means that I'm going to use this formula. C equals, or circumference equals, pi times diameter. So circumference equals pi times the diameter. And again, in 7th grade, we're going to be using 3.14 for pi. So 3.14 as pi, and then we're going to be multiplying it by the diameter, which is given in this problem as 20. So as we use the calculator, 3.14. No multiplying by 2 in this case because the diameter was given, so 3.14 times 20, 62.8. There is no rounding that needs to be done in this case because it stopped at the tenths place. Again, that was 62.8. There was nothing in the 100ths for us to round this problem to the nearest tenth. It stopped at the 10th place value. So I hope these examples helped. As always, you can reach out to me via Google Classroom or also shooting me an email. Good luck on your assignment.